Have you ever felt the tension before a layoff? Before anyone says a word? Drop a yes in the chat to let me know. And if you can hang in there for a second, I'm having problems on my Facebook live stream and I need to check on that one for a second. So please bear with me as I double check to see what on earth is happening there, because this is not popping up the way it normally does. So bear with me for one moment as I reconnect in there. Okay. Post details. It should be streaming. Checking the settings. That part's fine. Again, I apologize. I'm going to put this back on starting soon. Well, I wasn't able to get Facebook up, but some of you may have already been patient and waiting for me. So let me just go ahead and get started. So, have you ever felt that tension before a layoff? Before anyone says a word? Drop a yes in the chat and let me know. Can you feel it in your gut that something's shifting at work, but just no one's talking about it? It's not official, but you know that something big is coming and the waiting is eating you alive. Hey, I know that today's topic, it can end up feeling a little bit heavy. But if you've ever felt that vibe, like something shifting and going on at work, you're not alone. From talking to people and watching the headlines, the topic is on a lot of people's minds right now. And I just want to gently open the curtain today and offer both perspective and greater peace of mind. I'm not here to help you speculate. I'm here to help you to reclaim your footing when everything else feels uncertain. So, personally, I've been impacted by layoffs, but I've also been the one that's making the list of names. You may think that your leaders don't care. Some don't, but many do. And it's because of the requirements of leadership and demonstrating that singular unified face of the organization, you may feel that they all don't care because nobody can explain it in a way that makes it feel personal enough to satisfy you. We all have to toe the company line as we go through these explanations. So today I want to give you a little bit of a behind the scenes look at what you don't see and how to approach these. And then we'll get into some tactics for you on how you can feel less stressed in uncertain times. So, in case if we haven't met before, hi, I'm Sharon McCall. I'm with Whispering Fields Wellness, as a stress recovery coach and their founder. I came from a corporate career and ended up achieving all of my corporate goals to be a vice president in a wellness company that had a significant impact from the consumer perspective. And it's gone through the ups and the downs of this industry. There were times when we were scrambling to make more than we could ever think we needed. And then there are times when we had to contract and to reduce capacity. So I've seen this from both sides. And I can remember the times as I'm trying to figure out what's the right spot for me to have some of these conversations and including the right people. So people that were so used to seeing my door open all the time, I'd even be on like conference calls and just on my headset and with the door open so that if somebody came in, I could make a determination about whether I need to tell them just one more second or take a quick question. And so as soon as my door started closing, people noticed the difference. And then on top of that, for some of the calls, because of where the office that I had was, and the walls were so thin, I had to stop taking calls in my office and go and find a different location in the building, being able to take them because it was more soundproof. Because I was concerned with, as much as I was talking, that somebody in one of the adjoining office spaces could end up hearing me and being able to get that information. So when you say that you get a vibe that something's different, yeah, I I understand that, because there are things that change, and is that being able to get to that non-disclosure part of this operation and maintaining the confidentiality, leadership behaviors start changing. And so as you were going through these activities, can try this again. I have been having such connection issues today. So I don't know if you caught the first part or not. When I clean this up, I'll make sure that this is just one copy that goes out. So if you're still with me, thank you. And as you bear with me, I really appreciate it. Is for today, I'm just having a lot of technical challenges, it looks like. So just starting over. Have you ever felt that tension that occurs in the workplace before a layoff? Before anybody says a word, but you can tell that something's going on. Drop a yes or no in the chat to let me know. You can feel it in your gut. Something's shifting, but no one's talking. It's not official, but something big's going on. Just behavior's different, and the waiting is eating you alive. So I know today's topic, it can end up feeling pretty heavy. And if you've ever felt that vibe that something's shifting at work, you're not alone. From talking to people recently and watching the headlines, this topic is on a lot of people's minds right now. And I just want to end up giving you a little bit of perspective in regards to what it is for leadership that are involved in making these decisions, and then offer you a little bit of perspective and greater peace of mind so that you can better navigate through these times of uncertainty. And I'm not here to give you more evidence to feed any speculation that you've got. I'm here to help you to reclaim your personal footing when everything feels uncertain. So I've been impacted by layoffs, and I've also the one that's been making the list of names. So, and in these timeframes, you may sometimes think that your leadership doesn't care. Some don't, but many do. And yet, because they have to maintain that professional leadership presence and be aligned with the communication plan that the organization has agreed upon, that facade that they're wearing, it's really hard to connect and to feel like you're getting your questions answered in a way that's authentic and it means something to you. And so let me give you a little bit of a behind the scenes look about what's going on in these times of uncertainty and how the leaders themselves are making these decisions and coping through this. And then we'll get into what you can do to feel less stressed in uncertain times. So, hi, I'm Sharon McCall. If we haven't crossed paths before, I'm the lead health coach at Whispering Fields Wellness. I focus on stress recovery. And so if you're overwhelmed and completely stressed out at work, I'm here to help you find the right tactics to boost your energy and to regain work-life harmony. So before I became a stress recovery coach, I had a very successful career in corporate, was able to end up achieving an executive role in a major organization. And over the years, I've been part of when we ended up having to make more than we could in our 24/7 period for our dietary supplements and other nutrition products. And I've also been on the flip side of it when there's market contraction, we end up with excess capacity and suddenly we're having to shrink down the size and downsize the workforce. Um, in our business, it was just a roller coaster. Every few years, it seemed like it would change. And so, which is why I've got the experience and can share some of this with you. So, when you start getting that vibe and that sense, some of these things are very real. So, as a leader, I was always proud of my open door policy. But then, whenever any of these times of change would come, because of how confidential these conversations were, sometimes there was an NDA, a non disclosure agreement that had to get signed. All of a sudden, I was starting to have a lot of closed door meetings. So my people could tell because I'd no longer be on the speakerphone or on my headset where they could see my door was open and they could just give a wave to call them or to, if they had a quick question, just to come in and to pop in. So when that door started closing, it did start up the rumor mill of something's going on. We don't know what it is, but something's going on. And there was one situation where, even because of how the office layout was and the sensitivity of the conversation, I couldn't even take the phone calls in my office for fear that enough of what I was going to get said, of what I had to say, even with the headset on, it would end up going through the walls. So I had to go and find a different office space somewhere else in the building. And let me tell you, that was a clear sign to everyone that something was going on, because I just basically occupied several hours a day this space that was completely isolated and out of the way on the plant that normally wasn't used. So that vibe and that sense that you get when things are changing, it is very real, because leaders are trying to figure out how to handle this in the best way possible to maintain the confidentiality. And so some leaders, they do have to change their behaviors, and it becomes apparent to folks. Not to feed the rumor mill, but they are trying to handle this in the best way possible. And so, as we're going through this activity, this is not simple and straightforward. Let me just tell you, I've been through these and they are complex spreadsheets. You've got every name of every person on there, their job title, their date of service, their year, their time and role. How many roles in the organization have they done? Reviews, if you've got them, going back multiple years. You're taking a look at all of these different scenarios and you're sitting there with the filters trying to figure out what is the right combination of rules that you could then send to HR and to legal to get approved, that made sure it was fair and consistent and not targeted, and to make sure that you hit the numbers and that you minimize any regrettable losses. And it's a really hard balancing act, because when you're trying to ensure that you come up with rules like, is it based upon your years of service? Is it based upon your years of role? Is it on your shift? Is it across all three shifts? There's so many different ways you can slice it, but once you figure out a methodology, you have to use it across the board. So it can get really dicey in regards to these regrettable losses. And let me tell you, that's the HR term for people that you would love to keep in the organization, but as you're trying to be fair and consistent, they get impacted. It's a horrible phrase. And so the system itself becomes highly impersonal. Even when the people in the room care very deeply and are trying to, as best they can, to kind of like take the surgical knife and to figure out, okay, how do I keep the best talent in the organization and to make sure that we can re-expand back out and have the right talent for into the future, because you never know how the business changes and evolves. And so, and then through all of this, no matter what turmoil is going on in the leader's heart or head, they have to maintain leadership strength through all of this, that making sure that they minimize their tells as much as possible when they're out and talking to folks. The day that you have to deliver these messages and you start your cascading communication plan, it is heart-wrenching. You have to hold it together all day, no matter what story people come to you with, what's going on. You have to be firm, fair, and just listening to all these fears and concerns that they say. And you have to say the answers, though, that are aligned with the communication plan. You can't do much that's outside of that range. So That day when on these, there's plenty of them where I ended up having a really tough time through the day. Somebody's story would hit me so hard. And then there would be tears at night, just as I was so worried about everybody that was impacted. And that's the part that nobody sees. They're leaders that care and they really truly see beyond the dollars and cents of these decisions and what they do. And in these times, I am so glad that I now serve a God who sees what happens behind closed doors and even the tears that fall when no one else is looking. And let me tell you, as the leader, you get faced with all sorts of stuff that comes at you. I remember one time a woman came in to my office and she said that her house getting foreclosed and her marriage ending was all my fault. And you have to be able to handle this professionally. And I could see everything that she was going through. It wasn't my fault. It was a decision that the organization made and a series of her own different decisions that she'd made in terms of how to handle her life and her finances. But it still was very difficult to get through. So know that your leaders, they may seem like they don't care. There are some, though, that really do. And it's just the facade that they have to play as part of their role. So, getting into starting to spin this now to you, how can this information help you and how can you work through this? So, what part of this process is the hardest for you? The unknowing, the waiting, the silence? Which one? Drop it in the chat. I'd love to hear a little bit more. So, as we slow this down a little bit, and I really do hope my story didn't end up making you believe that you're reading, that you're seeing signals and more of what's going on than you already do. I just want to start focusing in on you and the situation that you're facing a little bit more. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, no pressure, but just a couple of gentle questions for you to check in on yourself to see if we can help shift the way that you're thinking and approaching about your situation at work right now. So for you, have you noticed anything different going on at work lately? Anything that you're doing differently? Your actions, not someone else's, your actions to feel just a little bit safer and more in control. So maybe you've checked your email more than usual, or you get a little nervous when you see a message from your boss or from HR or big announcement in the subject line. Have you been staying late just in case if someone's watching, volunteering for extra work? Maybe you've been tempted to join in on the speculation and the gossip, I'm sure, that's going on, even if you don't want to and you know it's not necessarily healthy for you or the team. Drop a "that's me" in the chat if you recognize one of these, and feel free to share what it is that you do. And if you recognize yourself in any of that, just know you're not alone. These are very common reactions for people that are high achievers and take a lot of pride in the work that they do. They want to be seen as valued. It's a really normal response when everything feels uncertain. But just for a moment, what would it look like for you if you could shift your focus to something that you could influence today? You can't change what your boss is having to do or what the organization needs to do. But what's something that's in your control? And I found personally that sometimes when I focus less on the outcomes and more on how I show up, grounded, present, prayerful, that's where the peace starts to grow again. Taking that moment to being able to connect in with God and to give up some of my concerns to Him. And if that sounds like something you want more of, maybe this is your invitation to take one step in that direction. Sometimes peace doesn't come from knowing the future. We can't control it. We can't predict it. We don't know. And you really can't, you're going to drive yourself insane if you're trying to predict it or to control it. There's a million scenarios. particularly with how many things are unknown right now. What you can choose, though, is what your response is today. So, are you ready to make that shift? Put a yes in the comments if that's you. And I will catch this on replay. So, if you put any comment in the chat and I don't see it, I will catch up with you on the and check in again later for anybody that's caught this on the replay. So, getting into those behaviors again. So, have you ever found yourself just working harder just to prove your worth without knowing why? Maybe it's not even in a layoff situation. Maybe it's just in general times of uncertainty. What behaviors do you do as you try to predict the unpredictable? Drop it in the chat. What about if it's to control the uncontrollable? Let me hear. I'd love to see what is going on in your life at work. And I've seen a lot and heard a lot of stories over the years. So I completely get it. The double checking on your emails, reading too much into subject lines or skipped one-on-ones, replaying things that your boss said in a meeting, just maybe as you're looking to being able to implement some control, you're working longer, pushing harder, gossiping maybe even a little bit more to kind of read the room and to improve your ability to foresee the future. And that was me. I remember the first time I went through one of these. It was an acquisition, and I had firmly convinced myself that my role was secure. I was too close to manufacturing. The acquisition company, their headquarters they had nobody nearby, so anybody supporting manufacturing needed to be local. So I was like, oh, I'm going to be fine. And I'm working on these really important projects these are great technological moves for the industry, not just for the organization. They're going to want to keep this. They're going to want to finish these. I'll be fine. Even if they contract me for a few months, it'll be okay. And I ended up throwing myself into that so much, and then just really like connecting even more with other leaders in the organization to try and prove my worth and my value to them so that they could put a good word in for me so that I could stay. You want to know what happened with any of that? None. Because the people in New York made all of the decisions. They just completely went through and just X'd the part of the organization that to them had no value. And that included my role. So their approach to what they did for acquisitions wasn't about keeping cutting edge. They wanted to standardize their processes. So it was often looking. So all that extra hard work, all that worry, and even the pridefulness that I had of thinking that I would survive, no, none of that happened. So as you think about what you're doing, how are some of these behaviors then draining your energy or stealing your time and attention from what matters most? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear. As I was in that time frame, it was a weird time frame for me anyways. Was in process of a divorce and figuring out what my whole life after my divorce was. And I just threw myself even more and more into work and just kind of delayed figuring out what all that was, which probably wasn't healthy from that perspective. So I certainly wasn't putting my time, energy, and attention into what mattered most, which was how to navigate my post-divorce life. So what are you doing? How is that impacting you? And I get it. Even when you logically know it's not personal, it still feels personal because of how much you care about the quality of your work and how much you feel vested in the success of your career and what you've achieved with this organization. And so your reaction to this and to this uncertainty, it's absolutely normal. It's not wrong. It's human. But I wonder, what is all of this perspective costing you? And what benefit do you get from all of this catastrophic forecasting and gossip? Isn't that impacting your stress level and just tying up your emotions in a knot? So as you're going through this season, maybe you want to shift so you're not in hypervigilance, but in holy groundedness. What might it look like for you to anchor into something steady, like God's truth, when everything at work is up in the air. So, as you think about all the times in the past in your life, what's one thing that's helped you stay grounded through times of uncertainty? Maybe it's at work, maybe it was in your personal life. Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear. So, some of the things that I've heard before, people enjoy going into breath prayers whenever they feel their anxiety coming up, or is they're tempted to go and gossip. They just go inwards and reconnect with God instead of giving in to the temptation to feed speculation. So they choose silence and just to have that inner moment with God. Or they notice when fear, really work on that, cultivating that self-awareness of how fear is impacting their performance rather than living. If you're spending all your time after hours worrying about, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Am I going to go find another job? Da, 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 instead of focusing on your family and what they need right then, you might want to see if you can end up finding a way to ground yourself and just enjoy the time with your family. Laugh with the kids, chase the dog, spend some time with your spouse. Gratitude journaling is another great way that I've heard from folks that they enjoy being able to stay grounded, particularly when spiraling thoughts show up. All it takes is a Post-it note and a pen, and you can jot a couple things down to remind you to stay grounded instead of giving into the negative thoughts and perspective. I've run into others that they have Bible verses on surrender and they just kind of keep it strategically located on their desk. Or even if it's not a workplace where you feel safe putting a Bible verse out, but something to encourage the reminder, just to give it to God. Because our faith reminds us we don't need to understand the plan to anchor to peace. God's the only one that controls the outcome. He's the only one who knows what's going to go on. We just need to take this step by step. So, as I get ready to close for today, as I think about these types of situations, I'm reminded of Psalm 119, 105, and paraphrasing this. God's word is a lamp to light your feet. It is a light on your path. And so, as you think about today, what's one thing that you can take away from this to help you find stillness in the uncertainty? Drop it in the chat. I'd love to hear. So as we get into today's prayer, God, help us surrender and remember to turn to you and your word when in the face of uncertainty. Illuminate our next step and guide us one step at a time in the direction you plan for us to go. Even if we don't know what's a few steps ahead, help us trust that you have a good plan for us. In Jesus' name, amen. So if this spoke to you and you want faith-centered tools to manage stress and to find balance, no matter what season your career is in, book a work stress solution session. We'll go through one stressful situation that you're experiencing at work to identify the next right step for you. We're walking this journey together. Next week, I'm going to do one more topic in regards to layoffs to answer some of the questions that I had been given. We're going to talk about how all of the thoughts and worrying about potential layoffs are wrecking your evenings. And we're going to talk about that. Until then, have a blessed day.